Ladies and gentlemen,
Good evening.
Are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
Hi, it's Joanna Oakey, and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast, brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Now, today we have the fabulous Zoran back again, but today we're talking about a slightly different topic to the topic that we spoke about a few podcasts back. We're talking today about the Australian Institute of Business Brokers.
ladies and gentlemen,
Good evening.
Are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
So, Zoran, you're the, what do they call it, Chairman of AIBB now. So I thought you'd be perfectly positioned to have a bit of a chat to us about who the AIBB is, and maybe it might be interesting for us to drill into what support there is in the industry for brokers. Just as I'm kicking off, I guess the first thing that I want to say that I find interesting is this terminology brokers, right? And obviously it's embedded into AIBB, the Australian Institute of Business Brokers. But I find in my travels that the word broker can be a nuanced sort of term, you know, sometimes, and I guess technically speaking from the licensing provisions, a broker is anyone who is sort of broking a deal between buyer and seller of a business. But it's interesting how it's nuanced in the industry. What's your thoughts about it all?
Well, some like it, some don't. I don't think what matters. What it really matters is what you do. Broker, tells that you are actually kind of broking a deal and representing both buyer and the seller, and you are on the side of the deal because that's the only way that the buyer gets a business and seller sells the business. But in effect, you're acting as an agent for the seller, and your loyalty and obligation is to the sellers. So I'm with you. Maybe it's not the best word to use, and some of the licensing authorities actually don't call it broker, but call it agent. But nevertheless, I think people understand where the broker sits and don't think it's that important.
And maybe in a future episode, we should just talk about this licensing regime as a whole, because I just find it interesting.
to say the least.
To say the least. Like, how is it that we're tied so closely to real estate?
A lot of new members call AIBB and they'd say something like this: look, I've got this license and I was told what not to do, but no one told me how to do it. And that's we get a lot of new members. In fact, I'd say that most of the membership are new guys in the industry that coming as an influx of the new members. And as AIBB, we do provide that through via third party. We do provide licensing if somebody's interested in actually becoming a business broker and getting licensed. For most of the state and territories, we provide licensing courses. But where real value in education with AIBB comes what you do after you get a license. So we got the 3 levels of education, which is, first one is introduction to business broking, which teaches you basics, introduction to commerce and industry, and it gives you all the basics. And later on, we can go through the actual subjects that are covered. After that, you need to have a minimum of 2 years experience in the industry before you can do another training, which is certified practicing business brokers, which goes in way more detail in all of the subjects and all of the points of business sales. And AIBB also runs a very successful business valuation course, and you can get a registered business value accreditation, which is, so AIBB it's registered with International Valuers Board. And it's quite complicated. It's a new industry, but you actually, if you complete the course, a prerequisite for that is 5 years. You actually become 5 years of experience in business broking. You then can become a registered business valuer. And on last meetings, we were talking, valuation course been running for about 5-6 years. And so far, looks like that the members generated for themselves, amongst themselves, about $10 million worth of revenue just as a direct consequence of that course. Interesting thing, there's about 150 graduates from the course, but only about half of them are operating as a business valuers. The other half done it because they wanted to become much better in business sales. And every single one of them, when we've done a survey, said it made us much better business broker doing the course. Course is fairly intensive. I think it goes over 8 days with the major assignment and then the peer review. It's not cheap and not everybody passes it, which is a really good thing because you really have to demonstrate high level of competency in order to pass and become a registered business valuer with Australian Institute of Business Brokers.
And so when you say it's not cheap, like what are we talking here?
Valuation cost is about $6,000.
Right.
But look, 2 valuations and you got your money back and made some profit at the end. Industry is quite large.
And so in terms of the sorts of things that the valuation course covers, is it sort of structured more towards the, sub 1 million market, or does it also cover larger SME, medium?
It does cover SMEs, so it doesn't go in corporations or listed companies or very large businesses. But SMEs, in fact, it covers everything that business brokers are selling, that anybody who works in the business broking industry would sell. So any type of and size of the businesses, which is mainly private businesses up to mid-market. Mid-market seems to be, 10 million plus. So anything up to 10 million would cover and would make you really good value. Having said that, you really need experience in the field in order to get the maximum out of the course. You can complete the course if you want, but if you don't operate in the field, you won't be registered as a registered business valuer.
And so maybe if we circle back a bit and then look at the AIBB as its whole, what does the AIBB see its purpose of being as? Where does it see that it sits?
Well, you call it non-for-profit. It is for profit. We try to make a profit every year. In order to provide a value to our members, we need to have a profit. So we need to make money in order so we can spend the money. But it's run by the members for the members. So it's run as a voluntary organization. It's run all the board elected every year. It's always elected from the membership. There are some paid employees of AIBB and contractors, but their main role is management of the institute, of the organization. The institute's been operating since 1989. It started in New South Wales, and it was a kind of association, New South Wales Association.
So it actually only started in 89. That's interesting, isn't it? Wow. So that's, let me do my maths. What's that? That's 28 years, right?
28 years. Well done. That's great. All the licensing, and you mentioned that at the beginning, we're going to talk about the licensing for business brokers. All the licensing is actually real estate centric. And most of the business brokers at the beginning selling retail shops. That's where the business brokers years ago industry was kind of founded. That's how it started. But nowadays, business brokers are dealing with much more sophisticated and much bigger transactions. And that licensing, it's kind of dragged on what we're doing. There's some checks and red tape that's really not relevant to business broking and seller businesses.
That's the complaint that I hear, like literally, Zoran, all the time about the issue. And, I can see that this perhaps is a big hole that AIBB needs to fill in. The licensing regime itself doesn't appear to give the skills that really relate to what the job of being a broker or an advisor does.
Absolutely doesn't give us skills. Absolutely doesn't give us skills. It tells you what not to do, but it doesn't tell you how to do it right. And it's a big void. And One of the main purposes of AIBB is education of the members. Running the course is also must-go conference for anybody who's in business sales or wants to work with the business brokers. Is annual Australian Institute of Business Brokers Conference this year. I think it's going to be in August, and it's in Melbourne. Normally attracts about between 100 and 150 delegates. And it's a big event. It goes for 3 days. There's a lot of education, a lot of P2P networking, a lot of support amongst the community that you're going to receive by being on them and meeting these people. Just back to your question, what else AIBB does? Well, there's 4 things. There's a membership education, there's advocacy, there's membership support, and networking and social interaction. Now, in terms of advocacy, we constantly work with federal and state governments, try to lobby, look, we're a small organization. It's about 350 members, but it's growing. We think, we actually believe there's about 1,000 people that actively full-time work as a business brokers in the country. So we've got about a third of the community as a members, and we think we're going to get to about half of that.
And Zoran, when you sort of look at those stats, I'd be interested to even know where those, where are the stats sort of sitting at the moment? That's interesting. But do you think those stats also cover these people who are using the banner of advisor or M&A advisor or M&A consultant? Because some of these people technically are brokers, right? Where they're remunerated by way of on transaction completion by proportion of the transaction value and all of that. I mean, technically they're brokers, right?
Technically they should be licensed, yeah, but they're not. So what happens? I think legislation in New South Wales at least says that if you assisting with a sale and as a remuneration you get a financial or some other gain, you need to be licensed as a business broker.
But then is where the complaints in the industry come from, which is, look, particularly at that end when you're advising multi-million dollar organisations on strategy, it's got nothing to do with real estate.
Nothing, absolutely nothing, yeah.
So I understand the issues, but I think what that creates is so you've got this sort of broad market of brokers and advisors who are dealing in different areas, but all required to be licensed under the same regime, which really has no connection to the work of a broker or an advisor. But I think the issue that it creates is the lack of a place for all of those people working in the industry and coming into the industry to get educated. And so I guess this is the whole potential that AIBB is filling. So on that note then, does AIBB, in terms of the type of education that it provides, do you think it covers the broad market of brokers? So for those mid-market and advisors who are dealing with high-level transactions, is there information that can be useful to them as well?
Oh, absolutely. Look, introduction course covers, introduction to the industry, managing a risk, analyzing leases, analyzes employee, reading the financial statements, appraising the business, listing a business. Then second level of this is actually certified business broker, which are more advanced courses. And it talks about the dispute resolution, stamp duty, and company and capital gain liabilities, compulsory acquisition by the government. Talks about sale of the businesses over $5 million. Talks about the different structures. Talks about the structure deal. So really gets into that in SME, not a small but medium market. And then valuation course, it goes even further. It covers a lot more as a legal report writing skills, expert witness in legal disputes, and so on. And it really gives anybody, because there is no standardized education for business brokers anywhere but in the Australian Institute of Business Brokers.
And this podcast, of course.
And this podcast. So what we try to create is a career path for somebody. So not to look at this as, okay, I'm going to come in, I'm going to do a course with the government. It's going to take me 3 days, and now I'm a business broker. But actually, it goes over 5 years if you want to do all the courses. As you're gaining more experience, you get educated through the process. And on the end, look, I'm biased, but I wouldn't deal with anybody who's not a member of Australian Institute of Business Brokers.
Oh, look, I think it's a really good point, because I think, there's sort of a low barrier to entry for business broking, right?
Very low.
Whilst the licensing regime is a little bit painful for people who, perhaps feel it doesn't meet the actual requirements of the job. It's actually fairly simple, I guess, to go in and do the few days and, sit the exam at the end. There's an exam at the end, isn't there? Anyway, whatever it all is, and get your license at the end of the day. So I think the low barrier to entry creates this issue in the market as a whole, which is an issue for all brokers, that there are, I guess you call them cowboys in the market, who perhaps don't have a high level of understanding of how the deals operate. And it can be hard for the end consumers to differentiate between somebody who's experienced versus someone who perhaps doesn't have that education behind them. So I guess at least AIBB is giving some sort of external validation for the level of education that someone has had in this area.
Well, yes, and that's a part of it, because not just education and experience, but also code of conduct that all the members have to abide by. Also, conflict resolution if one arises, which is rare, all right, but there is that. And also, you're responsible. You see your peers all the time. So everybody that I know that it's in the institute always tries to improve the industry as a whole. And it is. I really think that the public, and look, I don't see them as consumers, because most of the people that we deal with are business owners. They're sophisticated buyers or sellers, but I think that they benefit greatly by using somebody who's accredited by AIBB rather than somebody that's not. Not to say that somebody who's not is not as good, but at least you got some sort of check and something to start with, and somewhere to go if the things don't go your way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And then just flipping very quickly back to the advocacy side of things, I'm just interested in what the current areas are that require some of this advocacy assistance at the moment.
Well, there is a change coming in real estate industry in New South Wales in licensing. And the Act was quite antiquated, because that doesn't touch on digital transfer of digital information or digital communication at all. That is changing, and I think it passed the Parliament, and now we're waiting to become to be written in Act and to become a law. And Australian Institute of Business Brokers were pretty much in every meeting, and we always we put our submissions. We talk to lawmakers, and in some parts we were very successful, in some parts not so successful, but God damn, we try.
I love that attitude.
And similar changes were in Victoria, and our Victorian chapter was representing.
And sorry, what were you actually pushing for? What was your perspective? What were the issues with the changes?
Well, not to go into too many details. One of the things, New South Wales is the only state at the moment that the business broker's license is separate from the real estate license. And government's got a problem with that, well, at least here in New South Wales, and I was a bit closer to that than, let's say, what was happening in Victoria. But as a part of that, government wanted to abolish the business broker's license, and they managed to do so. So now everybody's just put it under real estate license, because you're talking about a few hundred business brokers, and you're talking thousands of real estate agents, and you can't really, it would be good to have a separate legislation, but you can't have it. And that's why. So that merger we tried to manage as much as we could to make it less obstructing for people that's selling and for people that are operating in the industry. as well. Another thing that we were fighting for is actually increased barrier to entries. And I think to great extent, I think that the new act will, now at the moment you can go do the course, get the license and open your own business. They at least introduce minimum of 2 years experience before you can go and get a license. And they put a certain levels of licensing, so which I believe it's going to be, corporate license and then licensing charge as well. And going forward, I think unless you're licensed, you won't be allowed to sign the agreement. So they're trying.
Okay, interesting. Fabulous. All right. Well, look, thanks, Zoran, so much for your time today. I think it's really interesting looking at AIBB and understanding not just the education that it does provide, both from a broker's perspective and obviously, as you said, the valuation perspective. So I think that's another interesting sort of consideration for brokers and M&A advisors out there. But also in terms of sort of the broader role that it's sitting in from an advocacy perspective. And do members themselves get very involved in the advocacy side, or is it essentially the people who stood up and said, yes, I'm prepared to take on an executive role?
Well, executive role changes, and there are also chapters, and there are also volunteers. When the board needs a bit of a hand, it's going to be given to a member to actually run with it. So I'd say that probably 20% of the membership is constantly involved in running of the AIBB, and there are changes. So everybody does the time.
Yeah. And sorry, just before we finish, just a few quick questions I just suddenly thought of that I'd be interested to understand on the registered valuers side of things with AIBB. Can people other than brokers do the valuation course?
They can complete the course and they're going to get a lot out of the course, but I don't think they can be accredited as a AIBB valuer.
Right.
Unless they're actually operating in the industry. It's heavily reliant on business selling experience. And that is a really, really big value of the course, and really big value. That's something that you get out of employing a business valuer from AIBB rather than somebody else, because they work on transaction every day. And that gives them valuable knowledge as well as comparative data. And we know what's happening in the industry. We know what's selling, what's not selling. A couple of things that I just would like to add, unless we run out of time. AIBB has got the actually largest database, which is called BizStats, only available to members. Largest database of data for sold businesses in the country.
Oh, right.
So we are, as a member, you actually, if you're valuing a petrol station, you can go there and see petrol stations sold and have a look how much they're selling. If you're valuing import-export business, you can see similar businesses and actually extract the data. Use this in your selling, when you're pricing businesses, but also use this in your valuation. And no one else has got access to same extent as we do.
And how does the data get into that system?
Contributed by the members.
By the members themselves. So
all the members contribute. Now we're working on the project because it's about 1,000, 1,500, whatever it is. I can't tell you exact number of pieces of data. So this year we're making a real push, and we actually employed the external advisor who's going to do a feasibility study and see how can we potentially either make this to the public, or how can we increase it? How can we make it better? How can we, because there's a huge need for something like this for anybody.
Oh, absolutely.
That works in the business sales industry knows, and we got it. We're just doing this feasibility study. So probably on Monday, January, February, beginning of the next year, we're going to make some announcements.
Feels like Monday. Feels like just around the corner.
Yeah, just around the corner. Just around the corner.
Probably will be by the time this airs. So anyway.
And one more thing that I want to say for anybody that works in the industry and it's not a business broker, best way to connect to people there on the front line, they're selling businesses, is Australian Institute of Business Brokers. Come on the conference. Everybody's welcome on the conference. Come and meet the people, extend the network, put a hand for the sponsorship. We need a few bucks to help us out going forward. But every partner that we have financially benefits immensely, because I can't even tell you how many millions and how many hundreds and thousands of businesses are sold by the members of AIBB every year.
So I like that. So this is a call not only to people who are interested in becoming part of the AIBB, or maybe you're already a member, and this is a good reminder for you of the sorts of work that AIBB is getting involved in and the sorts of value that they can provide to you as a member, but also a call out to our potential sponsors out there. Is that right, Zoran?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Show us the money, he says. And obviously, sponsorship of AIBB then gets access to the brokers who are part of the database. And
it gets look, what we do as a sponsorship is it's not a sponsorship in normal sense of the world that you pay some money and we put your banner there, but you actually get access to all the members, and their particular members they will be assigned to you who will help you get maximum out of your sponsorship. So we tailor sponsorship for whatever the sponsor wants, all right, limited by law, all right. So our goal, and it's been working, some people, been sponsoring us for 10, 15 years now. We make sure that it works for the sponsors. So we don't call them sponsors, we call them partners. So if you partner with AIBB, we're going to make that your contribution gets paid back as many times as we possibly can make it pay back to you. We do need a lawyer as a sponsor, so thanks for putting a hand on that. We really need a national lawyer who can help us out with it.
Watch this space, as they say. Good work, Zoran. I love it. Always be selling your ABC. No, always be closing. I think that's ABC. Fabulous, Zoran. Was there anything else you wanted to throw in there?
Well, look, if anybody wants to inquire about the membership or, more about the AIBB, go on aibb.org.au website, or just Google Australian Institute of Business Brokers. And there are several ways. Like, you can send us an email or make a phone call. We have a membership engagement person. She'll talk you through what the benefits of joining are. And if you want to talk to somebody on board, or if you want to talk of any previous members, by no means, we'll provide the contacts, and hope to see all the brokers in August in Melbourne on the biggest conference for business selling in Australia, which happens every year, and it goes over 3 days.
And maybe we might do another episode just before that conference.
We should. We need to do another episode with our future sponsor. By that time, our sponsor.
I love it. I love your ABC. Good work, Zoran. Okay, look, fabulous. Thank you so much for coming on board, Zoran. I think the AIBB fills in a really important gap. In this industry. Obviously, we're trying here too on the Deal Room podcast as well.
You do.
Between both of us, hopefully we can cover the lot. But and we talked a little bit about the advocacy side, and I really think that's extraordinarily important as well, because I think the industry needs a strong voice, because there's lots of different pools for how the licensing regime works. And I think there's probably a lot of potential for movement that could help the industry really tighten its belt into the future. So anyway, I think there's a really important need for advocacy in the area as well. So you're doing a great job,
Well,
Zoran.
we're doing our part best we can.
Cool. And we'll be back before the August conference in 2019 to talk a little bit about it.
Thanks, Jan. Bye.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode with Zoran, all about the Australian Institute of Business Brokers. If you're interested to learn more about AIBB, you can check out their website at www.aibb.org.au, or check out our show notes at www.thedealroompodcast.com, where we'll link through to their website. There you'll also find a full transcript of this podcast episode if you'd like to read it in more detail. Look, I hope you enjoyed what you heard today, and if you did, please subscribe to the Deal Room podcast on Apple Podcasts or your other favourite podcast player to get notifications straight through to your phones whenever a new episode is out. Look, thanks again for listening in. This has been Joanna Oakey and the Deal Room podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Have a fabulous day and see you next time. Aspect Legal has a number of great services that help businesses prepare for a sale or acquisition, to help them prepare in advance and to get transaction ready. We've also got a range of services to help guide businesses through the sale and acquisitions process. We work with clients both big and small and have different types of services depending on size and complexity. We provide a free consultation to discuss your proposed sale or acquisition. So see our show notes on how to book a time to speak with us, or head over to our website at aspectlegal.com.au.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Room Podcast. To find out more about this episode and other episodes in the series, check out the show notes or head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com.au.